Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the press. Welcome to our weekly press briefing. Today's press briefing will be hosted by, of course, the press secretary, Mr. Clint Watson. Mr. Watson, of course, will be delivering his usual updates. Among the updates that he will be providing today, he has the COP26 update. There will be some more information that he's going to be sharing today on that. There's going to be an update on COVID-19. He's going to be sharing some information on a courtesy call with the Chinese ambassador. And of course, he has several members of the government who will be sharing on various topics as well. So without further ado, Mr. Watson.
Tiska, good morning, everybody. Good morning, colleagues, and welcome back to another weekly presser. These seems to be happening more frequently. The weeks are going by very quickly, and we are indeed happy to report to you and the nation on the progress that the Davis and Cooper administration making in our quest to obviously make life better for Bahamians. And we do have a number of significant announcements to give you today, as well as updates, and of course take your questions on anything that you've been wanting to find out about the administration. We're happy to do that today. One of the, I call it one of the great phenomena that's happening in the public service particularly, which is, you know, the largest employer here in the Bahamas, more than 20,000 employees, is the fact that there's considerable focus and attention on what is happening with persons' well-being, their status, whether they're due for promotions, whether they're due for being made permanent and pensionable, whatever it is. There's been a loud cry for a while now on who's giving attention to us. And we're so happy that in this administration, we have a Minister of State who has done that. That has been the first thing that she has been engaged in office, is being able to regularize and make regular some abnormalities, and we've been having many successes about it. You would have seen recently a number of immigration officers who were promoted. That's because of work being done on the ground to ensure that there is remarkable change in the public service. So we've invited her to come and share what she is doing, what is next on the agenda, what the public service is going to look like, so you have a better understanding of where we're headed, and that this is not just a one-off, but indeed a part of the plan and the progress. And so I'm going to invite, first of all, the Minister of State for the Public Service, the Honorable Pia Glover-Roll, to come and address us and take any questions you have regarding the public service. So, Minister Roll, come. Let me just sanitize the area. Thank you.
Good morning. So, as Clint would have mentioned, there is an aggressive plan for reformation of the public service that starts with the reformation and moves into a digitization process. The goal is efficiency. The goal is responsiveness and ensuring that we bring the public service into the 21st century. Right now, our first order of business in our 10-point agenda is the clearing of a promotions backlog. That is ongoing. As you would know, there are over 20,000 employees in the public service. So we are receiving many calls, many messages, many queries, and my assurance to everyone is that all departments service-wide will be looked into. We have a simultaneous process going on because we have a number of teams that lead various ministries and departments' business. And so we're looking and analyzing and ensuring that we go back over those persons that may have been in the system for a certain amount of time and not confirmed, need reclassifications, promotions, of course, and of course, confirmation into the system. That is something that is very critical for us. So far, we're looking at the 4-year backlog that we would have cleared and have been approved. So letters are being typed, orders are being typed, and the Service Commission is hard at work. I know that I would have mentioned before as well that we are doing an audit simultaneously, understanding basically where the skills gaps are. So as we make our promotions, as we make our reclassifications, we're ensuring that we're building capacity in the areas that require that capacity to be built. In the same regard, we're building and developing career paths. The service has evolved first of all, the technological place that we are as a nation, as a world, needs to be tapped into. And with the evolution of the service, we must move into the 21st century by ensuring that our paper files are digitized. We're operating with those 20,000 plus paper files, and as you can imagine, that's a mammoth task to have to flip through files, and this is part of the process why the whole process in the human resources area of the public service has kind of been a little slow. So we want to move to automation and digitization, which will help in improving the speed, the efficiency, and the effectiveness and the responsiveness throughout the service. We're also looking at strengthening our HR processes. We have processes that may be 20 and 30 steps that we're looking to minimize those processes, which will give us a shorter time to be able to work with matters in the service and in the commission. There is the matter of settling long-standing human resources matters in the service. This is issues of back pay, increments, allowances. In some instances, persons have retired with pending matters of back pay and increments or reclassifications. So that is another part of the audit and the process that we're doing. We are looking at implementing a virtual call center because people just need answers to their questions. There are a lot of matters that the public and civil servants are requesting information on, and they simply say they cannot get through to anybody within the public service or their various departments. So the implementation of a virtual call center where we can immediately respond to the questions, the concerns, the queries, and provide a more customer service-based approach to the way we do business in the public service. We are seeking to bring on board a standardized onboarding process. That is because in the onset of engagement, you must set employees up to win. When they come into the public service, there must be a standardized process so everybody understands the ins and outs, the standard operating procedures, and what it takes to be successful. But not only what it takes to be successful, what it takes to chart your career course or your career path through the service, so that we no longer have masses of general service workers who have not a quite clear career path, but persons that we can channel in the right trajectory through the public service and thereby building capacity. And of course, this lends to succession planning in the overall public service. The digitization process will happen in tandem with the Ministry of Finance. This will be a cross-service digitization, but more importantly, an HRMIS system will be implemented where the matters of backlog ACRs or appraisals, not addressing the matter of persons needing promotions or reclassifications long-standing and it's being overlooked. If we put in an automated system like we intend to, then there will be alerts that will be upscaled to the various supervisors or those in charge that need to know that, okay, this is outstanding. So this would also help with outstanding matters and again, efficiency in the service. With all of that, we would need to expand our infrastructure. The public service unit, the public service department, has outgrown its current home, which is at the Meeting Street location. So obviously we're looking at engaging a new home, somewhere that we can grow and be sustainable as the public service. And that is something that will come along with our evolution into the 21st century, because we will be looking at a home that would also encapsulate a digitization department that doesn't really exist immediately in the public service. Human resources is the most critical thing. The public service, the civil servants are the human resources, the most valuable and vital resource that we have, the people that do the work. And of course, we need to make sure that we are taking good care to ensure that our human resources are well taken care of and are communicated with in a forthright manner. So we're looking at engaging civil servants across the service in internal focus groups where we ask the people that do the work, the technocrats, their advice, their ideas on what it takes to move the service forward, what it takes to improve some of the processes, and make sure that there's a buy-in with their participation. that integration of ensuring that the employees are involved with the process also will encapsulate some external programs where we look into programs that already exist in BTVI, National Training Agency, UB, as feeders for potential civil servants of the future, ensuring that we work in tandem with these ministries. A very important point that I would have mentioned in previous communications is that of ensuring that our civil servants also have access to mental health awareness and mental health support in the service. As a nation, as a world, we've been through a very critical period in terms of, first of all, we have had Dorian, we've had the pandemic, people are not doing business as usual, but we want to have the expectation that business does go on as usual in the public service, with whom we call, in some instances, essential workers. We need to make sure that our workers are okay. So we're looking into providing, across the service, mental health access to persons in the service to ensure that the persons doing the work are capable, competent, and okay to do the work from a mental health perspective. I would like to state that general hiring, while all of this is going on, is on hold in the service, other than engagement in a few specialized or specialist roles and areas that we will need to engage. We will be putting in place special project units to facilitate all that I have spoken about, to ensure that we get the process moving expeditiously, and ensure that we get this agenda of a new day moving forward in the public service. Any questions?
I think it was at the last press briefing, the press secretary indicated that I guess this administration was going to try to find a way to move forward with the plan to have new public service hires contribute to the pension plan.
Yes.
How is that, has discussions on that begun? Have there been discussions with unions, and how much is that expected to save the public, I guess, yearly?
Thank you, Sani, for that question. So there is an exercise to make persons permanent and pensionable, and that's the big word, across the country. Everybody wants to be permanent and pensionable. We realize that with the amount of persons that need to be captured in that exercise, that we will have to do we'll have to have a blanket exercise for that. So we are considering moving from 2016 backwards, retro, to capture those persons in the service that need to be permanent and pensionable. Of course, those that have adverse reports, we will have a special analysis of their files to make sure that we're progressing, to call them the best and the brightest, and those that are able to move through the system well. Other than that, any persons that we engage in new hires, and remember I said we aren't hiring generally at this time, but any new hires going forward when we do commence our hiring process will be considered for a contributory pension, because the sustainability of the pension plan in its current form cannot take on the burden of new pensioners. That process has been, an analysis has been going on for a while with that, even dating back to probably 4 or 5 years. So that analysis has brought us to this conclusion that we need to find a better way to sustain our pension fund with any new hires coming on board. So far, the analysis that has been done has been very promising. Persons understand that for the sustainability of the plan, that there will have to be contributory pension. And we are looking to, of course, it will be the persons that are already in the system, they're accounted for, but the new persons, in terms of a saving, will be the fact that they would be contributing, so the plan would be able to be more sustainable because of that.
You mentioned a few minutes ago that there will not be any more hires in the public service at this time. Can you give us a little explanation as to why that is?
Thank you, Berthany. There's a hold on hiring at this time until we make an analysis based on the audit of where we need to build capacity. We can't just hire and not know where to put people. We have to make sure we're placing people in positions that are available and that are necessary to move the public service forward. As you know, we do have a program called the 52-week program that will be relaunched as the Public Service Professional Engagement Program, PSPEP. That will resume into the middle of 2022, where we will continue to take on cohorts of the 52-weekers. But the plan is, after your 52 weeks, you will be confirmed in the service should you have no adverse reports. Those that have not performed well and may have adverse reports, then we will give an extended period for them to acclimate, or those that need to be released from the program. But that hiring process, which is the stream that we bring persons into the public service generally, will resume as soon as our audit is done, and I anticipate that would be about June or July of 2022.
Not long after the Davis administration was elected in September, the minister indicated something along the lines of, that hiring being on hold as a result of the government wanting to review to see if there are any, I think his word was, nefarious acts that happened in the lead up to the election. Can you say what has been found so far, if there were any questionable things in the public service in the area of the election?
And I'll begin by saying, thank you, Jasper, that it is customary for a new administration to review what has happened, especially in the last few months or weeks prior to them coming into office. We have found that in instances, there has been engagement into the public service on the day of election and even days after election when the government would have obviously been changed. So those in particular we would be looking at to ensure that the proper methodology of engagement was engaged for those persons. That doesn't mean that everybody that came in during a certain period is questionable, but we need to make sure that they aren't, and then take the necessary measures to either engage them in the proper way with proper contract signings or whatever the case may be, or see where they are to be placed. Because I will tell you, there are persons that were hired in the last 8 weeks that are still at home, that are being paid, but there's nowhere to place them. And that is why we have to have the audit, ensure that we are filling the gaps and building capacity where it's necessary, and not just bringing people on to have a job.
Are there a lot of cases like that where people are getting paid and they're at home doing nothing? Or no
There-
place to put them?
Thank you. There are a few cases, and we're looking to see where we can place them. In some instances where there is absolutely nowhere we can place them, we're still investigating some methods that maybe we can engage them maybe for another program, but there are a few, and as a result, we have to do what is best for the taxpayers' money, and we may have to disengage some of those persons.
Minister, you mentioned a pretty extensive overhaul of the public service. Any idea how much all of this could cost?
At this time, no. I don't have a figure that I can give you because we're still in the preliminary phases. We're still in the process of building our special projects unit, and then at that time we'll be able to analyze and see what the cost will be.
Minister, you said there's a lot of work that's being done with the pensions. Did you determine a rate on what you're going to charge for the contributions?
No, I haven't. The analysis is still being done by an external auditor.
Can you name the auditor, please, or the firm that's doing the work?
Okay, that would be KPMG. Yes.
Thank you.
You spoke about a 4-year backlog already approved. Do you have a breakdown in terms of reclassifications, confirmations, promotions? And what's the cost? What's the cost of it?
Thank you, Carla. The project that we finished, the 4-year backlog, which would have already been budgeted because those promotions would have been approved since June of 2016, that would encapsulate about 420 officers that are already in the system. In terms of reclassifications and promotions, again, that is ongoing, so there's quite no figure that we can put to that yet in terms of the actual amount of persons or the budgetary cost.
Now, we know the public service is responsible for a number of the public spaces. Since coming in office, have you had an opportunity to visit those offices? Because we know some have, over the years, have deteriorated. Have your ministry been?
Thank you for that question. So for those that don't know, yes, the public service is also the landlord of the government. We house the accommodations unit. We're responsible for leases of government buildings. In an exercise that I began in the second week in office, we are looking to disengage a number of buildings that we have in inventory that are unoccupied and leases are being paid. Was an immediate exercise, and that encapsulated about $4 or $5 million that we are looking to disengage. Again, I won't be personally visiting in some instances, but we do have a unit that's capable and competent that has an inspection officer that is currently going and reviewing buildings across the country, and that isn't Nassau-centric, to analyze our buildings, the needs. And in some instances, we have persons, civil servants that are employed, that are working in buildings that are not occupiable and should not be occupied by persons expecting to do a good job at work. So we're also looking into that. Buildings that are in disrepair, in instances where there are leases that may have expired and we need to make a determination. So all of that is being covered in our accommodations audit, and that process is going very well in tandem with the AG's office. Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
I'll get it for you.
All right.
Thank you, Minister Pia Glover Roll, for a very comprehensive explanation of what's happening in the public service. As you can see, Minister Roll is making it happen and working very diligently to ensure that the public service, which for so many years has been overlooked, persons can feel as if they're working in an institution where they are respected and they can have the dignity restored that over the years has deteriorated. So thank you again for giving us an update. I want to move now to an update from the Bahamas Public Parks and Beaches Authority, the Executive Chairman, Mr. Mikkel Bonamy. Obviously, you would have been hearing in the House of Assembly earlier this week an exchange going on about contracts and what's happening, what's not happening. He's now in the seat as Executive Chairman. His board will be following shortly, but I wanted to come and give us an update on what's happening regarding contracts. So, Mr. Bonamy.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Bahamas. It's a pleasure to be here. There have been a number of questions following statements which were made in the House of Assembly with regards to the issuance of contracts by the Public Parks and Public Beaches Authority. On the 15th of November, Minister Alfred Sayers, Minister of Works and Utilities, as the minister responsible for the authority, made statements regarding the issuance of contracts. I will briefly summarize his statements which were made in the House of Assembly to provide context. There were 6 points which were raised regarding the issuance of contracts. 1, all contracts were renewed in the lead up to the recent general elections. This included contractors who did not perform their obligations satisfactorily. Their contracts were, notwithstanding, their contracts were still renewed. 2, some contracts were not signed by contractors, but were not signed by the authority. And 3, after the general election was called, there was a rash of contracts that were issued by the authority, despite the fact that there was no funding available for those contracts. 4, contracts were issued without the board's approval. Number 5, some contracts that were issued did not receive any information. The accounts department did not receive any information regarding those contracts. And number 6, there were many duplications of contracts. Notwithstanding all that has been said inside and outside, there's a balancing act that has to take place. What we are very mindful of is that we're discussing the livelihood of Bahamians. And so, notwithstanding that we're discussing it in the House of Assembly, and it is something that is very pressing to the authority, we're being very mindful that we're discussing persons' livelihoods. Secondly, we understand as well that notwithstanding that we're discussing livelihoods, the board has fiscal responsibilities, and we have to follow the laws of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And so we have the contracts under review presently. There are a number of issues stemming from what was said in the House of Assembly, and so we're just here to make sure that the public understands what is happening. Any questions regarding what was said in the House of Assembly or anything of that nature?
Some vendors at Cabbage Beach have been complaining about access to that beach. I think they said more specifically on the weekends, it's closed, it's locked, they don't have access to the beach. What is the government's position on, I guess, what's been going on? Because the issue of Bahamians being able to access that beach has been a problem for a while.
Right, specifically as it relates to the authority, it's under review. It's something that we're looking at in conjunction with other agencies. As Mr. Watson said, we're still waiting for the board to be constituted. And once the board is constituted and fully vested, we'll be able to address those issues and be able to give a more full report.
How long is that review expected to take for the contracts that were issued?
Well, that depends on when the board meets. There is a number of matters that is being investigated, and so I cannot give you an exact time, but it is top priority for us.
Are you able to say how many contracts are under review?
Not at this particular time.
Could you, I stand to be corrected, did you say contracts issued without money?
Without funding being allocated at the time that the contracts were issued.
So, but the money was there, or?
It's something that we are investigating, and so as I said, we don't want to get out in front of the process that we have to carry out with the board, and so I want to meet with the board before we actually start, putting things out into the public domain.
As a general policy, are you satisfied with the level of beach access in the country? Is that something we can see improved upon as opposed to diminished, as we've seen in recent years?
I believe it should be improved upon. Bahamians should have access to the beaches. I do.
Is there sufficient access at current? Is that under review, the access generally, especially in New Providence?
Well, I took office last week, Monday. I'm going through all of the minutes. I'm going as far back as 2014 to see what the reasoning was at the authority, and then maybe after going through all of the minutes, I'd be able to answer that with a little bit more information and information.
Do we think we could see legislation perhaps even considered to ensure that investors coming to the country can, especially those who take beachfront, which is prime real estate, can ensure there's guaranteed access? Is that sort of a policy position of this government or yourself?
I can't speak to that presently as it relates to the government, but as it relates to me, I believe that Bahamians should have full access to the beaches.
Thank you.
Did you say how many contracts in total? Did you?
No, I didn't say how many contracts were in total.
Did you say?
Not at this particular time.
We good?
One quick question for Minister Roll, if she just had a moment.
You want to talk to Minister Rowe again? Is it about the public service?
Just about the few. A few, is there an idea of the exact number and the costing of those few people who are still at home being paid because they couldn't be placed, understandably?
Do we know?
Well, I don't, can you hear?
Sure.
Thank you for your question regarding how many persons are still at home. The persons at home are not only in New Providence, they are across the country. So as we analyze our records of persons that are engaged or persons that we think are engaged, and we do our due diligence to check, obviously, with their immediate supervisors, that is how we're processing the check and balance of who's on the job. That process, again, is ongoing. I don't have final numbers, and as a result, I don't have final costs. I want you to know that these programs, like the 52-week, are funded. The funds are available, but we can't have people being paid to sit at home, or we can't have people being paid that come to work and there's no job for them to do.
Forgive me for wanting to tie you to maybe a conservative figure. Is there any conservative figure?
A conservative figure on the amount of persons in the first instance, I would say probably about 40.
Substantial.
Yes.
Is there a costing behind?
And let me make it relative. The program normally engages about 1,000 people. So at this time, about 40.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just if you had any idea of what that may be costing.
I'll get that for you.
Thank you.
All right?
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. And it's important to stress to all of you, particularly the public service, all of this is important so that we're able to identify when it's time to engage people where there's needs, where there are open vacancies, and so that people can be fit in the proper place. And that's important because we believe that where there's a need for people, the Davis Cooper administration will hire people. That's a part of the mandate. That's a part of fulfilling the need for the public service to operate effectively. And so that's what's happening right now, is making preparation to be able to engage people where there is a need. Okay, I want to go through a couple. Thank you, Minister and Executive Chairman Barnaby. I want to go through a couple of announcements we have from Prime Minister, and then take your questions this morning. As we always start with, is COP26, because it's been something that we've been fully engaged in, and we want to ensure that you are aware of what's happening with COP26. The technical team is back in the Bahamas, having returned this weekend. They have been busy finalizing their reports to Cabinet regarding key outcomes and recommendations from COP26 in Glasgow, Scotland, to ensure the Bahamas is moving forward regarding climate action over the next 12 months. Furthermore, the technical team has made key strides in ensuring that the Bahamas has been nominated and appointed to key United Nations climate change constituted bodies to help big ocean states like the Bahamas have a stronger voice and access in the international climate change arena. The Bahamas has also been formally accepted into the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action, making its first representation among other nations and multilateral financial institutions at COP26, with the Prime Minister, along with technical focal points, being welcome to join a virtual meeting in December. Now, being a part of this group is vital because, of course, we are now a decision maker in a space where financial decisions to support climate action will occur, which is vital for a country like the Bahamas, which is on the front lines of climate change. And so we're happy to report that. And of course, once Cabinet gets the official document, we'll be able to share further outcomes with you regarding COP26. Excuse me. I want to move on now to update you on the COVID fight. As you would have heard last week, the Bahamas' travel health notice advisory for the CDC has now been lowered from 4 to 3. Which is good news for us. This has both significant implications and advantages for tourism's overall product. We are encouraged that the Davis administration response to the ongoing COVID-19 outbreak in the country has resulted in the CDC modifying its level. This is welcome news for the tourist industry. It also means that hotels can begin now to receive group and conference bookings. If you didn't know that before, at a level 4, groups and conferences were not allowed to book in the Bahamas because of their guidelines and because of the high risk. Now, with our lowering to level 3, we can now welcome groups and conferences and conventions to begin booking at our major resorts, which, as you know, is a significant portion of our tourism revenue and the tourism product. So that spells good news for the Bahamas there. Prime Minister talking to a number of international leaders. This week he spoke with the President of Israel. He held a courtesy call via telephone with the President of Israel, Mr. Isaac Herzog, on Monday to discuss areas of mutual concern where Israel has specialized technology and competencies in agriculture, their country's future assistance to the Bahamas' agricultural industry. And that's something that's under discussion. President Herzog expressed Israel's openness to leading expertise to the Bahamas in that area. They're also reconfirming their commitment in strengthening ties with the Bahamas, which is good. The president also invited the prime minister for an official visit to Israel, and Prime Minister Davis reciprocated, inviting the Israeli president to the Bahamas. So we'll look and see how that partnership is strengthened in the months to come. As I said, it's becoming quite regular to receive calls international leaders, particularly after Prime Minister Davis's performance at the United Nations in September, and then again at COP26. World leaders have been reaching out to dialogue with Prime Minister and the Bahamas, and that has definitely spelled good news for us. I wanted to give you also, we also spoke to the Chinese ambassador to the Bahamas this week. Yesterday, actually, a courtesy call was held between Prime Minister and the Chinese ambassador, Her Excellency Dai Jingli. The ambassador brought greetings from the Chief of State and the Premier of the People's Republic of China, congratulated the Prime Minister on his recent election victory, noted the good tone the new government has established relative to its working relationships with China, and indicated areas of continued and possible cooperation. In summary, the Prime Minister extended well wishes to the Chief of State and the Premier and reaffirmed the commitment of the Bahamas to the One China policy, which is good working relationships and continued cooperation. Also recognized that China interventions in 2009 and 2010, and again in 2015 and 2016, which were critical in ensuring the Bahamas against the devastation of COVID-19 and assisted and sustained in fiscal health. He also talked about the fact that the cooperation remains good between both nations. There was discussions on future ways of helping, particularly through education, technology, the fact that there was a fund available to the Bahamas to access some $30 million for special projects related to either hospitals or the renovation of the Thomas A. Robinson Stadium, which are two areas the Prime Minister spoke about that he would like to access as well. And they will continue to talk and dialogue between each other to two nations going forward. We also met this week with Grand Bahama Shipyard on the Grand Bahama Shipyard Investment and Expansion Project. Prime Minister met with principals of the Grand Bahama Shipyard Investment and Royal Caribbean and Carnival Cruise Lines. Can you imagine all of them in one room? They're usually competitors, but on this venture, they're partners. They're all partnering in the expansion and investment of the Grand Bahama Shipyard, which is unique. The investment pegged at hundreds of millions of dollars. It's expected to begin soon, providing all approvals are in place. Once completed, hundreds of Bahamian businesses will benefit, as well as opportunities for direct employment with the shipyard. Now, following a detailed presentation by the shipyard on the expansion, both sides discussed critical matters that would impact the project. It's the beginning of many more discussions that will take place to facilitate the expansion. Prime Minister assured the group that the government will partner to ensure the process is smooth. This is good news for Grand Bahama to have the major cruise lines come together with the shipyard to partner as investments. They all have shares in the shipyard and to partner with the expansion. You would have remembered the shipyard would have lost critical docks over the past few years. They're now expected to replace those docks. One of those docks will be the largest in the world. It will now put the shipyard bark, once it's in place, to being the largest shipyard in the world. And we're excited about that, about the prospects of that, and what it means for the island of Grand Bahama. And so those conversations will continue for the Grand Bahama Shipyard and Investment Project that's slated to take off beginning next year, actually, and span over a few years period, bringing much economic boost to the island of Grand Bahama. You may have seen the government's revenue, $92 million ahead of budget in the first quarter. The Bahamian economy is performing well in the first quarter as it continues steadily recover with revenue outcomes exceeding expectations. Gains from the uptake in economic performances were due to the global resurgence in the travel and tourism market. And now, as we said, with the lowering of the travel advisory, we expect to see even greater bookings and more success in the tourism market. A combination of vaccination strategies nationally and in other countries have resulted in the loosening of travel and other COVID-19 related restrictions internationally, positively impacting the domestic business activity here in the Bahamas. So I think those are all of our announcements from Prime Minister to you today, and let's take some questions and answers for you. Let's begin with Krishna Russell from the Tribune. Hi, Krishna.
Good morning.
Morning.
So last week, the Prime Minister tweeted that there needed to be a national conversation when it came to the issue of marital rape. When can we expect that discussion to take place, and what is to happen after this discussion? This has been a polarizing issue for a long, long time. So can we expect that the issue will be finally settled with this administration?
I think it's important to understand, first of all, there has to be a national conversation about this. I know a lot of people oftentimes refer to government. What are you going to do? And I always tell people, governments can put legislation in place, but if it's not the will of the people or it's not what people want, then it's not effective. First of all, I think it's important to say, there are laws already on our books that if any kind of crime is committed, whether it be abuse, whether it be sexual assault, all of these are already on our books. So these are already criminalized. So there are actions that can be taken against people who commit these kinds of acts. Issue of marital rape obviously is a social conversation that has to be had. What I mean by that is it needs to incorporate many other organizations like the church, civic groups, women's rights groups, marriage groups. It has to incorporate a national conversation. What you find happening is whenever governments put forth information or referendums on particular issues, sometimes we think it's going to go in a particular way, like the last one we had, and it didn't. You would think, oh, women's rights, oh yes, everybody wants that, and then we saw overwhelmingly people voted against it. And this has to be a conversation driven by the people. And that's what governments can have positions. You would have seen many persons in government have expressed outrage against it and has taken a support that they believe it should not happen or to be criminalized. But that's not enough, people in government expressing their views. It has to be a national conversation. And I believe that even as journalists, it shouldn't just be, what is the government saying? What are the people saying? What are the organizations saying? What about talking to victims, perhaps who've been victims of these crimes? Let's hear the story. If we want this to become a major discussion and perhaps lead to legislation, then let's build the story around how impactful this is to our country. Not just what government is saying, but what are the people saying? What are victims saying? What are groups saying? What are advocacy groups saying? All of this shapes the conversation. And I would encourage all of my colleagues in the media to let's make this a omnidirectional story, not just what is government saying. Let's take this story to the people, talk to organizations, and let's get an advocacy about, let's build an advocacy about the issue. That then forces government to put in place, even if it was not at the forefront of legislation, it will move there because of the will of the people. Let's have that conversation. Let's find out how Bahamians feel about the issue. That drives a national conversation. You've probably heard individually, I saw some reporters asking various members of government their position on the matter. People have strong views about it and against it and believe it should be criminalized. But that's not enough to have individual views. There has to be a national conversation among the Bahamian people. And I believe we ought to drive Bahamians to talk about the issue and cause there to be a national conversation. We're yet to have that. And I believe once that happens, it will cause there to be a movement of legislation.
Okay, also, we are a few days post the falling away of the emergency powers orders. Are officials at all concerned about, I guess, the explosion of socialization that took place over the weekend and how that may affect COVID-19 cases going forward?
Yeah, Chris, we all were watching and think, God help us all, Lord. The COVID police are very active, I can say, as a matter of fact. Discussions are ongoing to increase the number of COVID ambassadors throughout the country, along with additional training, particularly in light of relaxed curfews and people having more events, to ensure that the guidelines are followed and people enforce the laws. And that's why I stress again to people, it requires personal responsibility. All right, we can keep these numbers down if people are personally responsible for themselves to ensure that they follow the protocols. Because no matter how much we police it, people complain about policing. But we want people to take personal responsibility to ensure the protocols are followed with events and with gatherings so that people remain safe.
Another question on the COVID fight. Recently, the Minister of Health had said that the government was in the process of trying to procure treatments for COVID-19 that we don't already have in the country. We've seen this week that Pfizer was seeking approval for a pill. Where are we in getting these new medications that we don't already have?
We're expecting to have them by the end of the year. That's our target. And we hope that these new medications will be here within that period.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on to Yuri Kemp from Tribune Business. Go ahead, Yuri.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. First question, what about the Chinese investment? I know you've been talking to the Chinese, the government's been talking to the Chinese just recently. Is there any investments in the pipeline from the Chinese government?
Nothing right now. A lot of it is talk for mutual agreements and partnerships and what can we assist with, whether it's agriculture, whether it's health, whether it's education. A lot of that talk is taking place now, but no major significant investment at this time on the table.
Okay, let's move back to Grand Bahama then. What about the Grand Buchanan sale? That's still up in the air, isn't it?
It is. Discussions have been happening regarding that. We are expected to make an announcement on that very soon. That's all I want to say on that. Very soon. There has been talks taking place, and the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Tourism, is expected to address this issue very soon with the outcome.
Okay, there's another question from Bahama as well. I know the GB Power was trying to get a rate increase, and there was a cabinet subcommittee that was trying to talk about that. How far have they progressed?
Matter of fact, they met yesterday, and they met last week as well, to talk about what's been happening. The good thing about this is the subcommittee, outside of meeting, they've already met with the Port Authority to talk about this and reiterate the position. The government's position is it will not support a rate increase to any portion of the customer base at this time. All right. Now, we're waiting for the 45-day review period process that the power company is going through, and we will see what their outcome is. It is our hope that it stayed. The committee has been very clear and very vocal in talking to the Port Authority about its position, and our position remains just that. And so we'll wait and see what happens at the end of the 45-day period. You're welcome. Let's go to, who's the next reporter? Nassau Guardian, Jasper Ward. Hey, Jasper.
Hey there, Mr. Watson. So you noted that a national conversation is needed as it relates to marital rape. We've had the national conversation. We've heard what the church has had to say. We've heard what advocacy groups have had to say. We've heard what the United Nations has had to say in recent years. You know, if I'm not mistaken, we saw the opposition express dismay that the Minnis administration made no movement on the issue. Will the Davis administration criminalize marital rape by the end of this term? Is this on its legislative agenda?
I'm glad you asked that, because you said we've had a national conversation, and the biggest group you've left out, the people.
We've done the man on the streets with the people.
A man on the street is not the voice of the people. Let me explain what I mean by that, Jasper, to help understand this conversation. When we're talking about a social issue that affects anybody, particularly those who are married, talking to a UN group, talking to the church, hearing from government and opposition, that's good. But what we find is when we don't talk to the people in general numbers, we sometimes think we're representing a view that surprisingly is not shared by the people. What I mean by that is many of these same groups advocated for women's rights. We went to the polls, we voted, we saw the outcome. It was something the people just weren't prepared to do. And what I mean by the national conversation is we have to, it can't be, okay, I want to interview you, I want you to respond to me, what do you feel about it? It has to be an ongoing thing, an ongoing discussion. And that's why I made the appeal to all of you, my colleagues, because I believe in news media, we had the great opportunity to shape public impression and stories and share information. A lot of times people, and here's why I strongly believe the referendum failed. Because people didn't there was a lot of, in these town meetings happening and people explaining this and explaining that, but it did not filter down to the people who were going to the polls. It just didn't. You look at the town meetings, they were empty or they had minimal people. And I think that we have the opportunity in media where we reach everybody, every sector of society, to tell our stories, talk to the people who are impacted by it, or the people who want to advocate for it, and share the story so that everybody understands the importance of this topic and this discussion. Sadly, that can't happen in 2 weeks. That takes time to reach the masses. But I believe as media personnel and professionals, we have to shape our talk shows, our news stories, our feature stories around the topic so that people begin to understand and appreciate what it is that we're talking about. That's why I talk about a national conversation. That can't be driven by government. That has to be driven by the people. That has to be driven by the fourth estate. That's when you become the partner of government and legislators, because you help bring a story to the forefront that people may just talk about it and say, okay, let's move on from it. It has to be talked about. You've spoken, you particularly have spoken to many persons in government, and you've seen and heard their views. No one has said they're against it. People support it. That's not enough. There has to be a greater community support that says we want to see this translate into legislation. Coming to office, it was not one of the priority issues of the Davis administration because we've been dealing with a lot of other things that we said we'll address first. But it doesn't mean that it's not something we're not prepared to take on and prepared to ensure it becomes law. But there has to be the will of the people that prevail in saying this is something we want. And that's why I suggest that all of you, if this is something that you want, then let's put it to the people and get the people to agitate for it to happen. But it's nothing that the Davis administration is against. And I believe that if the people's will speak, then it will be on the top of the agenda.
Will getting signatures advance the cause?
I think it helps. It certainly helps. It certainly helps. And that's why I make appeal again to all of you advocacy groups who are out there. to do that. If this is what the people of the Bahamas want to see, then let's make it a project that the people of the Bahamas engage themselves in to see change.
Because I have more
Sure,
questions.
go ahead. Sure, Jess.
No problem. Does the Davis administration plan to continue with the previous administration's policy on demolishing shantytowns?
Good question. Thanks, Jasper. As you all know, the demolishing of the shantytown was something that addressed in the previous administration due to the challenges they were facing at the time. It was just beyond acknowledging, obviously, something had to be done. And so that was their way of addressing the issue. A special cabinet select committee was put together who addressed the issue and put it on. Now it's a new administration. That committee doesn't no longer exist. And what we have been doing since coming to office is using the arms of government that deal specifically with these issues to address the issue. So, for example, if an issue came up in Shantytown regarding immigration, immigration has dealt with it. Something came up regarding Ministry of Works and violations, the Ministry of Works have dealt with it. We've not had to put together a special select committee to deal with Shantytown demolitions because it's not been an issue that's come up under this administration. And so how we've been dealing with it so far is that there is an issue, it's being dealt with the relevant government agency at this time.
Does the Prime Minister plan to have the Attorney General look into the findings of that Auditor General NSA audit?
Yeah, both of those reports you spoke to, particularly the NSA and even the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture itself, all of them have revealed some damning facts in it. It's just serious, very serious about it. And of course, what we have done is we've looked at these reports. They're now going to be submitted for the Prime Minister to review. He's going to have to review them and make a determination. So we'll wait to hear from him. He's not reviewed them as yet. They've been sent to him, and so we wait for his review to determine the course of action on that. But yes, very serious allegations in those reports. Okay, let's move to our news. Berthany McDermott. Hi, Berthany.
Good morning.
Morning.
Sorry. I asked last week about the furloughed employees. Now that the emergency order has ended and it's almost a week, has a decision been made? Is there an update for those workers?
So here's where we stand with regard to that. Under the previous administration, what was given was a 30-day window after the emergency orders would expire for companies to make a decision and a determination as to what they were going to do. Now, that was a 30-day. That'll take us to December 12th. The laws also provide a 90-day window, which takes us to March 12th. What has to happen within that window by March 12th? Companies either have to disengage the persons or call them back to work. That is the law. And that is the parameters that we are now working in for companies to make a decision. So they have until by the latest, March 12th, to either disengage those furloughed workers or return them back to work. And the government is standing behind the law in that regard.
Now, I know last week the question was asked, how many persons are on furlough? Do you know or have an estimate? No?
We still don't. We try to find out. I spoke to the Minister of Labor, and he said a lot of the record keeping was not kept previously. So we're now trying to determine who's at work, who's not, who's furloughed. There is no record on that.
Has there been any conversation with some of these employers in terms of their intentions, if they're able to bring some back, or
Yes.
if they're going to disengage by the March 12th deadline?
Yes, we've had the discussion, and we've reminded employers that they have to make a decision. They are aware of that, so we're watching it.
They didn't indicate any way that they may
No.
be.
We do know some people were brought back. We do know some people were disengaged. But as far as we've made it clear to employers that you have to make a decision. And so they know they have to make this decision. So we're hoping that they don't wait till March 12th, that before that they decide what they're going to do with employers who you would think to them are valuable and important, that you make a decision as to what you're going to do with people who are weighing in the balance. So we're continuously having that conversation to make a decision.
Okay, I have a follow-up question to Krishna's question about the emergency orders. I know you said COVID police officers, they're beefing up or increasing the number of COVID police officers, if I'm not mistaken.
We're increasing the number of ambassadors who are checking events and so forth. So people may have originally been reassigned to another area. We're making sure that people show up in these areas, particularly when there are events. Rather than just having 2 ambassadors, there may be 4 people assigned to check an event.
Okay, so it's not like we're recruiting more
No,
ambassadors?
no,
Okay.
no.
Also, last question, I promise. The probe into the BPL matter,
Mhm.
any idea when that may be, if it will be released, or if any details of that will be made public?
Sure. We are engaging Deloitte. They're going to go in to do a rapid assessment. And they should be going in with patrol in a matter of days. So once they go in and to do this rapid assessment, we'll make a determination based on what they find, what happens to that information. But there's something that's going to be a company, independent company is going in and who will document what they find.
And that will be released?
I'm not the chairman of BPL. I can't say. I don't, as press secretary, want to say it's going to be released, and then it's not released. We just know that an assessment is taking place, and hopefully, once that assessment is taking place, we can cross that bridge when we get to it as to whether it will be released to the public. All right. Let's go to Laurencia Smith, JCN. Hi, Laurencia.
Hi, good afternoon. Well, my apologies, good morning.
Good morning.
My first question is, can you give an update on when the RISE program will be relaunched to help those persons who are on food assistance?
Right. The short answer to that, Laurencia, is no timeline has been set as yet. But the RISE program is being reshaped. Let me say that first of all. People on food assistance, though, are continuing to receive this. That's not stopped for them. A matter of fact, it's 10,000 people a month who are on food assistance. Many are now receiving debit cards through Bank of the Bahamas who haven't received it before. All a part of the administration's plan to restore dignity to people. They don't have to get vouchers and all of that stuff. They can use a card. The RISE program has, and here's why the RISE program has been restructured. A lot of people just saw the RISE program was about food assistance only. The RISE program also has a component of education to it, as well as health to it. So all of these are being looked into to see how well we can execute the full intent of the RISE program, and not just the food assistance portion of it. I'll give you an example. A part of that program is for persons who go into school, if they end up getting A's, all A's, there's an incentive for that, you see, to encourage education. So all of these are components of the program that are being worked through and reshaped. But persons are still receiving a food assistance program. They're still being able to be serviced through that, but no timeline yet on when the RISE program itself will be relaunched.
Okay. As for my second question, Chairman Barnaby answered my question, but I have another question. Under the previous administration, a number of special committees were created. Does the Davis administration have any intentions of keeping those administrations and those special committees intact, depending on what the circumstances is? As you know, we had a special committee for the vaccination program, for example. So I just want to know if this administration will re-engage some of those committees.
A lot of those committees still continue, right? Those are made up of civil servants, are made up of private sector volunteers. Those continue. They continue to work. The vaccination committee continues to work. And so the short answer to that is a lot of these committees are continuing to work. They've not been stopped, particularly in national programs like vaccination and so forth. They continue. All right? Let's go to, thanks, Laurencia. Let's go to Carla Palmer, ZNS. Hi, Carla.
Hi, the Cabinet building is demolished. You were supposed to become some information from it?
Right. We understand, and I want to give some preface to that. The building was demolished under the previous administration. So what's happening now is it's gone. Obviously, the building is gone. What's going to happen? The intention was by the previous administration to build a new cabinet office right on the particular facility, right on a particular property. All right, that was the intention. What now has to happen is this administration has to now go and look at these plans, see if there are plans, and see what is being determined. I've been told that has not happened as yet. There has been no movement on that as yet. The administration has been busy since going to cabinet trying to get the country where it needs to be. There's been no talk or discussion regarding this cabinet building. It's just been demolished. So what has to happen now is a discussion has to take place as to what is going to happen, where there are plans in place, were they approved, Ministry of Works, who's building the building, was the contract issued, all that has taken place. None of that has happened as yet. So right now we have an empty space.
Okay. The work still continues out there. Any update on that?
Which work that is?
By the Prince George dock.
The cruise ports?
Yes.
Not yet. We do know that they're still working to meet their deadline. It's a private company, and so they're working to meet their deadlines, and they're still constructing the cruise port as planned. Nothing has stopped with that. That's moving forward. Okay. Let's go to Sanchester Brown, Eyewitness News.
Hi, Mr. Martin. Most of my questions have been asked.
Thank you. Let's move on to Roy. Thank you.
I do have one.
Sure.
though. You mentioned something about when we were talking about marital rape, about the public driving conversation. The conversation that has been the top of a lot of people's minds lately has been domestic violence because of what has been happening, right? And one of the things that was mentioned was a facility, maybe a government facility or something that
Safe house.
a safe house for, you know, women and children who have been abused so they can have somewhere to go. Is that a conversation? Or is
I've heard that
something
conversation. Yes, I have heard that conversation. The Minister of Social Services and his Minister of State have talked about it. And that's a good example, again, of national issues and people shaping the conversation. As tragic as the events have been that we've heard, it's caused an outcry among the people and it's forcing government to now consider and take a look at these things. And that's what I'm talking. I'm not saying let's wait for an event to happen because Lord knows we don't want it to happen. But there has to be an outcry of the issue that will drive the conversation, and that has driven this conversation. And there are talks in the works. Even the Attorney General says he's reviewing these laws on the books regarding domestic abuse and violence and so forth to see whether there is any room for strengthening or reforming. But the conversation is being had at the government level, yes. All right, Royston Jones, Eyewitness News Web.
Thank you. I had a follow-up to sort of Sandy and Jasper's question on the issue of marital rape, which has come quite often. And you'd mentioned that if there is a conversation, a greater will of the people, you believe it could, for legislative change, you believe the government will have it on its legislative agenda. Does that mean that there's a political willingness to deal with the issue? And is there concern that if there's not a representative view that we should change it, that the government's afraid to move on it because of the loss of political capital?
No, as a matter of fact, I'm glad you asked that because it has nothing to do with political will or political. It's a matter of what the people of the Bahamas who's hired the Davis Cooper administration, what do they consider priority right now? What do they want you addressing right now? It's all about that and not about political will. Because I would hope we'll always remove politics out of when it talking about national issues. It's never part of the conversation. If you were to take a poll of the cabinet and people's stands on it, you would find it unanimously people's support. Something should be done about it, especially a cabinet that has a predominant presence of women in it. A heavy presence of women. They've been very vocal on their position. And that's why I believe that it's a great time and opportunity for the national conversation to drive there to be change if that is the case, if that is to be the change. Again, if you just look at the cross-section of this media room, the only issue is the issue has been driven pretty much by one media house. It's not been across the board thing. So that right itself tells you that the conversation is not reaching the masses because it's not something that every media house is talking about or writing about. And so again, that tells you where people are thinking or where there's an issue. We see across the board, media houses talking about domestic violence, talking about abuse. And so I believe, again, you follow the conversation. And if there is to be a greater mandate for something, it has to be something that I believe the masses speak on and not just one or two people talking or driving.
Thank you for that. I also had a question. You touched on it earlier. This is the ground in kind. You said the Deputy Prime Minister will have an announcement to make shortly about that. I'm curious whether or not we've seen any effort maybe to get a better deal. I want you to maybe tease what may be happening. Are we seeing a better deal for the Bahamian people in the likes of what may be announced?
Deputy Prime Minister will explain.
Understood. Has there were any negotiating teams appointed to assist in this regard, or was that all Renewal Lucayan Holdings?
No, the Ministry of Tourism and Investments has had a team who's been talking and meeting with them.
Same team?
No, this is new team.
New team. Understood.
Yeah.
I also had a question with respect to the emergency orders. I believe that the travel ban on Haiti was hinged on the emergency orders. With the falling away of the emergency orders and emergency powers, does the travel ban automatically on Haiti fall away as well? And does that mean that Bahamians and permanent residents who've been stuck there for many, many months can return? And is the government playing a role in assisting them in getting back, considering the challenges they've had, deal, so to speak, of what they've had over there.
They surely can return. I'm pleased to announce that Bahamas Air had its first flight to Haiti yesterday. There will be 2 flights per week, Bahamas Air, one to Cap Haitian, which was yesterday, and the other to Port-au-Prince, which will be on Saturday. They've also returned flights to Cuba, 4 flights a week. Bahamas Air has begun these flights this week. So as it has happened, persons who want to return home are urged to call Bahamas Air and book their flight and come on home. We're receiving them.
Thank you. Travel bans also
Yes.
automatically follow? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I think that is everybody. And so, of course, our final thing, our new segment, which you've introduced, where we feature a new Bahamian food place to let you know what our Bahamian entrepreneurs are doing. Last week we had the Wicked Wings that you enjoyed. This week we can give you a sweet treat. The Banana Bread and Company. I want to invite Mr. Nadario Ferguson, who is the owner of Banana Bread and Company. And listen, I've sampled it already. Oh, y'all gonna love it today. Come on, Nadario, come on up and just tell us a bit, real quick, about Banana Bread and Company.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. A pleasant good morning to you all. Good morning, Bahamas. It is a pleasure to be here. I am so thrilled for the opportunity to come, extended by Mr. Watson, to talk a little bit about our small business. So, along with my wife, Rochelle Ferguson, we've started Banana Bread & Co. November marks a year since we've been in business, and it's been a very lucrative and exciting experience thus far. We specialize in only banana bread, so we make mini loaves. We make some cupcakes and muffins, and also we have a 1 pound, a 2 pound, and a king loaf. We have the best banana bread in the country, hands down. I'm not ashamed to say it over and over and again. I've had grandmothers, I've had moms, I've had uncles come to me and said, "What have you done? What have you put in this?" I'm like, "I can't tell you that, sir. Do you want more?" "Yes." "Can I take 5? It's not a problem. So I'm so happy to be here and to share with the Bahamas what my mom, who is like the foundation of this all, has shared with us. So thank you, Mom, and I appreciate it. So you can contact us at 819-2226. We're on all social media platforms, My Banana Bread & Co., on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. We have a business card out front where you can scan the QR code and become a member of our mailing list to be able to find out when we have new releases and new toppings. The toppings that we currently offer are pecans, walnuts, raisins, chocolates. We're going to release a vegan option and also a diabetic-friendly option soon. So look out for us for doing that real soon. But for the holidays, it's the best treat ever, and we hope you enjoyed today. Thank you again, Mr. Watson, for your time.
Thank you very much. So obviously, colleagues, if you have any other questions or anything, feel free to always reach us. We're building and expanding our team. You'll meet our team real soon. We're expanding our press office team here at the Office of Prime Minister to accommodate you. Thank you so much. And without further ado, let's go have some banana bread. Thank you all for watching online as well. Thank you.